This does not look good. What do you do when something breaks? Well, you get some glue and you try to fix it. What if your car breaks or your television? Either you fix it or you find someone else who can. Hopefully better than this, because this just isn't working. What are you going to do when the thing that is broken is your government? That's exactly where the colonists found themselves following the French and Indian War. Buried under tons of war debt, Great Britain looked for ways to pay off their bills. So they raised taxes, and they raised taxes against the colonists. You had the Molasses Act, which led to the Sugar Act, which led to the Quartering Act. Of course, not that kind of quarter. We're talking about soldiers living in your house. Then they passed the Tea Act and the Stamp Act. We were acted to death. Well, these acts led the colonists to action against the government. So, of course, they declared independence from Great Britain. But now that they were independent, what are they going to do? They have to form a new government. And there's not a manual on government, so where are you going to go? Well, the Founding Fathers, they were an enlightened bunch, so they went to fundamental principles. George Mason said, "No free government or the blessings of liberty can be preserved to any people but by a firm adherence to justice and a recurrence by fundamental principles." In other words, we need to go back and look at the ideas that really matter. Now again, there wasn't a manual where these were written, but they went back to political philosophers, folks that really thought about government and people and what really worked. You'll hear the name John Locke and Hobbes and Baron de Montesquieu. These were guys that wrote about government and the ideas that worked in government. And from these writers, they derived these fundamental principles. So what are the fundamental principles that they found and they used to shape our government in the United States? The first one that they looked at is called inalienable rights. Inalienable rights is a freedom or a right, according to nature, natural law, cannot be taken away. So in other words, if you found yourself outside of a government, just in nature, these would be the rights that you would have. In the Declaration of Independence, Jefferson labeled them as life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And again, don't think about as an alien from outer space, but more to be alienated. You cannot be alienated from these rights. The second is the idea of consent of the governed. And this is the idea that power for government to operate comes from the people. We're like the electricity. People are the electricity that keeps the government running. We give them permission. And we do this through voting or not voting for specific people or ideas they have. The third is representative government. And this is a government where the people elect public office holders to do the work of the government, make the laws, execute the laws, and judge laws. In other words, your parents, me, I don't go to D.C. or Richmond and run the government, but I vote for folks that will do that. The next principle is democracy. And democracy literally just means people rule. And if it sounds like these ideas are very related, it's because that they are. But one way you can think about them is that consent of the governed is the foundation. And based off that foundation, you have the how, and that is through representative government. And representative government is just a type of democracy. You could have a direct democracy where your parents would go make the laws, but we don't in this country. Now, limited government is the idea that the government is not all powerful. It is limited and it can only do the things that the people give it the power to do. So there are limits to their power. And those limits are brought from rule of law. And that means that the government and those that are governed and celebrities are all bound by the law. The biggest law in this country being the Constitution. All right, so take your notes, keep learning, and remember, if you need anything, go to digitalbenjamin76.wix.com/civics. If you have anything directly you want to ask me, feel free to send me an email.